Good morning. My name is Michael Goldman. We're going to move from budget and finance to safety and operations with a meeting today of the Safety and Operations Committee. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. We have today's agenda before us. If there are no objections, I'd like to move to approve the agenda of the committee for today's agenda as presented. Are there any objections? Seeing none? Hearing none, the agenda is so approved for this meeting of the Safety and Operations Committee. We also have minutes from our last meeting before us for approval. I trust that the committee members have had an opportunity to review the minutes from our November 19th meeting. Unless there are any objections, we'll consider the meeting's minutes approved as presented. Are there any objections? Seeing none on the screen, hearing none, we'll consider the minutes approved. We have two items on our agenda today. This month, we have before us requests for a Metro Rail station name changes, one for an existing station and one for a new station between National Airport and Braddock Road in Virginia that's currently under construction. Next, the committee will receive its regular update on the progress of phase 2 of the Silver Line. Today's update will also include an outline of the safety and security certification process for the project, as is required prior to acceptance and the start of revenue service. I'll ask Ms. Bowersock to present the first item on station name changes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lynn Bowersock, Senior Vice President, Customer Service, Communications, and Marketing. So before us today, we have, as you noted, two requests from jurisdictions. The first is the changing of the West Falls Church Station secondary name. The second is the naming of a new station, as you can see here on the map. West Falls Church serves the Orange Line, and today the secondary name is VT for Virginia Tech / UVA. The new station infill on the blue and yellow line is proposed to be Potomac Yard. So if we look at the input that we received from the public, the jurisdictions each did their own outreach and input and received letters of support for their requested proposals. We did a regional survey. Nearly 3,700 people participated. In fact, 85% agree that UVA should be dropped from the West Falls Church Station name as a secondary matter because it no longer is located there. 91% support the Potomac Yard name. When you add the Virginia Tech name as a secondary, you get a more mixed set of results, as you can see. And that is because some of our customers find it confusing to have Virginia Tech on two stations in Northern Virginia as a wayfinding matter. There's also some customers who in the comments indicated that they think of Virginia Tech in terms of its main campus in Blacksburg, and that's a bit confusing as well. For that reason, the board's original naming policy with respect to universities required that to be considered as a secondary name, it would be a main campus only situation. However, given that Virginia Tech is establishing a significant presence in Northern Virginia with the Innovation Campus, which contains technology, industry, collaborative space, research and development facilities, as well as classroom facilities and other assets.
Excuse me, Lynn, can I just interrupt you a minute? I'm getting a message that there's no audio feed that's going through to people participating and listening and watching online. Can we just check that before we proceed?
I got the same message, Mr. Chairman, from Virginia staff. So.
Okay, so Lynn, do you want to try and pick up the highlights from the first few slides and then pick up the presentation at this slide?
I can do that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So again, we are considering eliminating the UVA portion of the secondary name of West Falls Church Station because UVA is no longer located there. We're also considering today, the board is being asked to consider from the jurisdiction the new station name of Potomac Yard for the blue and yellow station that's under construction. If we go to the survey results, we find that 85% of the regional survey participants agreed that UVA should be dropped from the West Falls Church secondary name. 91% agree with the name Potomac Yards as the primary name for the new infill station. And there is a more mixed result with respect to Virginia Tech's application as a secondary name, because as a wayfinding matter, having it at 2 stations in Northern Virginia does pose some confusion for some customers. However, because Virginia Tech is establishing a significant presence in Northern Virginia with the Innovation Campus, technology industry collaboration, research and development and classroom facilities, among other space, we do have no objection to the Virginia Tech name being applied as a secondary name at Potomac Yards and remaining at West Falls Church, and believe that over time, customers will be able to make that distinction. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bowersock. In order to begin the discussion, I'd first like to ask for a motion from a committee member to approve the proposed station name changes for both of these 2 Virginia stations at issue.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Materno. Can I get a second also from a committee member?
Second, Mr. Chairman. Devin here.
Thank you. Thank you. So now we can turn to questions on this matter. Just to ask a clarifying question to Ms. Bowersock and to set the stage here. So we're actually doing 2 different things with these 2 stations. With regard to West Falls Church, we're deleting one of the secondary names. But with regard to Potomac Yard, we're actually voting to approve the full name for this station, Potomac Yard, plus the secondary designation, VT for Virginia Tech. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And if I can just focus you for a minute on, I guess, slide number 3, the one entitled Station Names Under Consideration. So just to clarify how this will look, with regard to West Falls Church, essentially we will be removing the hash mark and the UVA from that station name. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And with regard to Potomac Yard will appear the same way West Falls Church appears, and underneath it will appear the VT for Virginia Tech in the smaller typeface font, as with the West Falls Church station.
That is the recommendation, yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, I'll open it up to other members of the committee. Again, Mr. Rouse is participating all day as a committee member for the federal government in lieu of Mr. Horner. Mr. Rouse.
Certainly, I have no major comments or questions. I did make a quick wardrobe change there, fitting for the discussion at hand. But no, one thing I would point out is having driven to both West Falls Church and Alexandria at rush hour to do night classes from Tyson's. It's good to actually have a metro there now, and I think that underscores what Mr. Schmedberg said earlier and the importance of the system beyond just workers and commuting. It's expanded well beyond that. So I think this outlines a critical role for this system, not only today but moving forward as well. So nothing else for me.
Thank you. Ms. Gitterby?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Letourneau?
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. So this is a significant development for Virginia and for the region in terms of what's happening at the Potomac Yard station and the whole national landing area with Amazon HQ2, and now the addition of the Virginia Tech campus, which was really one of the most exciting parts of that announcement. So I don't take the exceptions to board policy lightly. I do think that there is potentially some confusion. One question I do have for staff is, so when it comes to universities, even on the picture on the left, we have Ballston MU and Virginia Square GMU, and there's other examples in the system. I went to Catholic University, so that was Brooklyn CUA, that are sort of in big letters as part of the primary name. What distinction do we make there? Why are some universities designated that way, but not others and all? And I think I know the answer, but I want to ask for the discussion.
Yes, sir. So Mr. Letourneau, at the time that the board determined the now current policy on station naming, it grandfathered in names of universities that were part of the primary station name. So those were not changed. Subsequently, though, it required that university names become a secondary matter in station naming.
Is that true for all universities, or if they're large enough, if they're the main campus, for instance, like at Foggy Bottom with George Washington, or for Catholic, could they still be a primary name?
The board's current policy does not anticipate that even a main campus for a university within a half a mile of the station would be a primary name. No, sir.
Okay. But this is still an exception to policy because of the size of and the fact that it's a secondary campus in terms of Virginia Tech.
Yes.
Okay, and I will say, for the universities, particularly the Marymount, Catholic, George Washington, those are in fact the primary campuses. Obviously, Virginia Tech will ultimately have two different designations on our system, neither of which are the primary campus. So it does get a little dicey, a little bit confusing. So I think it's appropriate for us to handle it this way to make sure Virginia Tech is included at the Potomac Yard Station, but for it to be sort of a secondary name as part of that station, similar to how it is at West Falls Church. And I am supportive of this measure. I appreciate all the work that went into. I know there's a lot of discussion about this over time as this whole thing developed. But I'm really excited about the opportunity for that Potomac Yard Station to open and for it to have that Virginia Tech campus.
All right, so we'll move on to other board members for questions. Secretary Slater.
No questions for me, thank you.
Mr. McMillan.
I have no questions, thank you.
Mr. Meridian.
No questions, thank you.
Chair Smedberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to echo some of what Matt said, I mean, not only is this an important step, I think, for the city of Alexandria and National Landing and Arlington County, but it is for the region. I mean, this is going to be a significant presence here, albeit at a secondary campus, but the activity that is surrounding the Innovation Center is going to have impacts well beyond the education community, as Ms. Bowersock highlighted earlier. So I'm supportive of this, and actually I think the Potomac Yard Station down the road is going to add a lot to the system in terms of ridership and use. So appreciate all the work, as Matt said, that went into this. There was a lot of talk around this, and thank you, Lynn, and your team for your efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If there are no further questions or comments, I'd like to call for a vote on this item. I'll ask the board corporate secretary to take a roll call vote.
Chair Goldman.
Aye.
Alternate Director Rouse. Alternate Director Rouse.
Sorry, my audio keeps dropping out. Aye.
No problem. Director Gideby.
Aye.
Director Letourneau.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you very much. That concludes the station naming item on today's agenda. Now we'll move on to the information item dealing with Silver Line Phase 2. Before we begin that discussion, I would note again that Mr. Horner is recused recused from this item, and then Mr. Rouse will participate in his place. Ms. Mason and Ms. Impastato will present the update for this item. Ladies? I guess-
Good morning. Thank you for that. I am LauraMason, our Executive Vice President for Capital Delivery. And I'm here today to present an update on the Silver Line Phase 2. The purpose of the presentation this morning is to review significant unresolved issues, to provide you an overview of the safety and certification process, and to review the schedule to completion and acceptance for this project. Of the 14 previously identified quality issues, 10 of them have been resolved. Since our last briefing, 4 have seen improvement, as noted by the blue arrows at the end of each line item name. The ballast deficiencies at the yard have been resolved, and all sampling done has passed. And the cross-level issues in our special track work, as well as the precast concrete panels, have been resolved pending agreement on an escrow account to address higher maintenance costs. Of the 4 issues underway today, I will focus on the crossbond spacing, which has progressed significantly since our last briefing. The other issues are included in the deck, and I'm happy to answer questions on them if you have them. Looking at the crossbond spacing deficiencies, approximately 10% of the 200 locations we have issues where the spacing requirements have not been met in accordance with our specifications and standards. The contractor, in coordination with Metro as well as the Airports Authority, is developing modifications required to address each non-compliant location and bring it into compliance with our requirements. This is still underway as the design has not yet been approved, but based on the discussions to date, we believe they will be able to meet our requirements and are tracking this as a high-risk item until we have design approval and a schedule for implementation. Today, I'd like to raise to the board and board's attention 14 additional issues that have yet to be resolved at the project level. Before I go into these issues, though, I would like to note that quality and non-compliance issues do happen in construction, which is why we so often focus on quality control and quality assurance programs to ensure the satisfactory resolution of any issues identified. To date, more than 1,800 non-compliance issues have been identified, and 98% of those have been resolved through the project processes. However, the 14 I raised today are, in our judgment, rising above the level of a typical QC item or a punch list item. Now, individually, each of these issues is not on the critical path. However, taken together, they represent concerns to the acceptability of the project. Now, rather than go through each issue individually, I'm going to describe these 14 issues in 4 categories. The first is on component failures. These are issues where we are seeing the contractor need to replace components before the system has even opened up for operations, which raises concerns regarding the durability of the project. All 4 issues are considered unresolved as we do not yet have concurrence between the 3 parties onto a root cause of these failures. And without knowing the root cause, we cannot be sure that we understand why the deterioration is happening and how it will be prevented in the future and not repeated once we take ownership and operation of this asset. The next category relates to our stations and systems. There are 3 issues that remain unresolved, and these relate to the application of our specifications or to the overall performance of the system due to interaction between subsystems and components. Again, these are unresolved, and we are working with the Airports Authority to get to an agreement on how these systems should function and how they will be implemented within our system prior to acceptance. The third category relates to the yard buildings. These relate to the safe occupancy and use of the yard facilities in order to maintain our fleet of rail vehicles at this location once we get into service. These are all cases where we believe that the yard buildings do not yet meet our specifications for safe occupancy and use. The fourth category is issues that are open, but we have resolution underway. While we've made progress with MWA and its contractors on these issues, the length of time that has elapsed gives us concern that these are not yet resolved, and we urge MWA to resolve them ahead of substantial completion. So in summary, we have 28 issues that have been discussed and now raised to the board. 10 are unresolved, meaning we lack agreement on a path to resolution. 8 are underway, meaning we have tentative agreement and a resolution is in progress, but not yet accepted. And only 10 are resolved, meaning the agreed remediation is complete, though some issues may require negotiation of an escrow amount to cover increased maintenance cost. Our concern is primarily with these 18 that are not yet resolved. While all must be resolved prior to project acceptance, we believe that some of these are required to support system performance demonstration, and at least 17 of these 18 are required to support our operational readiness. However, as the resolution is not yet known, that assessment could change, which is why we are pressing MWA to resolve these as soon as possible. And now I would like to turn it over to Ms. Impostado to discuss the safety and security certification process.
Thank you, Laura. This portion of our presentation will review the process for safety certification of the project. Fundamentally, safety certification is the process applied to the functional period of a project that ensures all practical steps have been taken to integrate operational safety, security, and emergency management requirements into a project or equipment and system procurements. The functional period of a project is illustrated in this slide as beginning in project development, progressing through engineering and design, construction, procurement, installation, and testing. Safety certification has been required under Metro's System Safety Program Plan and is expanded in scope under Metro's Safety Management System. Safety certification typically encompasses system-wide elements such as train control systems and rolling stock procurements, fixed facilities such as stations, yards, and shop facilities, and finally, plans, procedures, and training that have a nexus to safety and security, such as emergency preparedness plans and standard operating procedures. The outcome of a thorough safety certification process is the collective verification of the safety and security readiness of a project prior to project acceptance and startup of public use. Safety certification is an independent assurance function that is led by the safety department, separate from the acceptance processes that are conducted by the project team, who support but do not control the safety certification process. This next slide depicts the safety and security certification project life cycle in greater detail. The process for certification follows FTA guidance, which was published in 2002. This guidance follows a 10-step process across the design, construction, and startup phases of the project. With regard to the project we're discussing right now, all engineering and design activities for safety certification have been completed, as reflected in green on the slide. The Airports Authority and Metro are currently executing steps 4 through 8 of the process and will move on to the final 2 steps of the process upon substantial completion of the project. Safety and security certification is considered complete upon issuance of a final safety certification verification report, which validates that the system meets all of the requirements necessary in order to operate safely in public use. This next slide depicts the responsibilities for safety and security certification, which are clearly identified in FTA guidance and are annotated in project agreements. In large complex projects, such as the Silver Line, it is not uncommon for there to be multiple parties responsible for safety and security certification. With regard to this project, the Airport Authority has responsibility for safety certification of the construction activities. This includes mainline, stations, and the yard. MWA has primary responsibility for development and implementation of numerous project plans and activities which govern the execution of the safety certification process. During this phase of the project, Metro has a supporting responsibility to provide technical oversight of the Airport Authority's safety and security certification activities, as well as certifying elements of the system which are the express purview of WMATA, such as fare collection, arts and transit, and signage and graphics. Once the project progresses towards substantial completion and the safety certification activities completed by the Airports Authority have been closed and verified, Metro will assume responsibility for the operational readiness phases of the project and the according safety certification for this phase. This includes operational hazard analysis and pre-revenue service testing, service planning, simulated operations, and the completion of the final safety certification verification report. Throughout this process, the WMSC has overall oversight of the execution of the process by both the Airports Authority and Metro. This next slide depicts the process managed by the establishment of a Safety and Security Certification Working Group. This group includes the Airports Authority and Metro and is overseen by the WMSC in accordance with their State Safety Oversight Program standard. During this project, the WMSC acts in two capacities: as the State Safety Oversight Agency for the Airports Authority, who are the recipients of federal funding for the project, and as the State Safety Oversight for Metro as a transit agency. Multiple committees are sanctioned by the Safety Certification Working Group to assure project safety, including committees chaired by the Airports Authority, which focus on fire life safety and general safety and security certification. The Airports Authority-led committees are active until substantial completion of the project is reached. Metro serves as a member of these MWA-led committees, and the WMSC serves as project oversight. After substantial completion, Metro-led committees to assure operational readiness will be the only remaining active committees. This next slide illustrates how safety certification is an integral part of our safety management system and how it takes place throughout projects to assure the safety and security of our system. The Airports Authority and Metro have been working with a project team throughout all phases of the project to assure the safety of the system. This slide juxtaposes the safety certification efforts with the current progress made against project milestones. All parties are currently working towards substantial completion, with the safety certification process serving as an independent assurance of the safety of the system. Having given this brief introduction to the safety certification process, I will provide additional updates and progress reports at future board meetings as the project approaches critical milestones. I'd now like to pass the presentation back to Ms. Mason for some final information on our next steps.
Thank you, Ms. Impastato. So looking to the project completion, the Airports Authority currently projects that substantial completion will be at the end of April 2021 for Package A, which is the main line system. Because of this delay and related to the tie-in work, there will be an additional weekend shutdown required in 2021 to perform the final cutover, but the date of that weekend shutdown will be determined once we have better clarity on the actual scheduled substantial completion date. Based on an April substantial completion, that would yield a tentative forecast for the start of service in the fall of 2021. However, we maintain that Metro will not set a date until all identified issues have been resolved to meet our acceptance and we have a clear path to an acceptance of the project. The Airports Authority response to these unresolved issues will determine the path forward and timing for our ultimate acceptance or rejection of the project. So in closing, several issues remain open or unresolved, and we continue to work with the Airports Authority and its contractors to mutually agree on a path forward to resolve each of these open issues, as well as achieve our key milestones related to safety and certification. All safety certifications are required prior to operational testing, acceptance, and start of revenue service. And with that, Ms. Impastato and I would be happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Mason. Thank you, Ms. Impastato. I do have a couple of questions for Ms. Mason to get the ball rolling, and I'm sure other members of the committee and the board will have questions as well. If we can turn to, I guess, slide 7, dealing with the crossbond spacing deficiencies.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is the first time we've actually had a public discussion of this issue at the board level. So in your third bullet, you point out that I guess fixes will have to be made to 10%. So that's 10% of 200 locations. So that's 20 locations. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
20 locations on the whole length of the project, Silver Line Phase 2. So my question is, what is the work or what is the fix that has to take place at each of those 20 locations?
So the fix is unique to each of those locations. The issue related to the specifications and the spacing deficiency relate to the interplay between the spacing, the length of the track circuit, which is the distance between two impedance bonds. If you're looking at the graphic in the upper right-hand side, that would be between the small boxes where our track circuit, a small current flows to show whether or not a track circuit is occupied. It's the relationship between the length of those track circuits and the distance between the cross bonding, which is shown as those vertical lines farther apart between the two sets of tracks, which allows the negative return of the traction power from the train to be shared between tracks 1 and 2. So in order to address where there is a discrepancy in this ratio of spacing of cross bonds relative to the track circuit length, we have several options. We are looking at potentially removing or relocating a cross bond, or removing or relocating some of the impedance bonds so that the spacing requirements are met. Each location is being reviewed in detail by the designer of record, by the contractor, the airport's authority, as well as our own automatic train control engineers. And each location will be approved before the fix is implemented in the field.
So this is physical work that will have to take place at each of these 20 locations.
Yes, in most of those locations, it is some physical work that will be required, which may have follow-on programming work related as well as additional testing requirements following the completion of the work.
Yeah, thank you. Turning just to slide 8 on the additional unresolved issues, as it's entitled. So you're adding 14 new open unresolved issues today to the 14 that you have been previously reporting on and bringing to the board's attention. Those are the ones that are on slide 3. So I guess my question is, why have you waited until now to bring these new 14 issues to the board's attention? And in that connection, I note that some go back a number of years to 2016 or 2017, as shown in slides 10 and 12. So why did you wait so long, and why are we getting this now?
Thank you for that question and the opportunity to address that concern. This is not a case of waiting until now. It's really a judgment of what is the issue and what is our likelihood of getting to successful resolution on the project, and whether or not it raises to the level of requiring board attention. In the 14 quality issues that had been previously presented, we saw in those issues something unique that really rose above and beyond normal quality issues on a project, things that would have either significant operational impact, funding impact, or political impact, and we wanted you to be aware of them. These other issues are issues that have come up on the project that we were trying to resolve through the normal project processes. Because of the relationships established in the cooperative agreement, MWA, the airport's authority, is responsible for the quality of the overall project. So we've been working through MWA to address these issues. In some cases, MWA has been the one to find the issue. In some cases, the contractor self-reported it. But in others, these are items we have brought to MWA's attention and have been pushing them for resolution. We bring them to the board's attention now because as we get closer to substantial completion, and as the airport's authority has reported out in their public briefings, they're over 98% complete with construction. Our concern is that these still remain unresolved. And while they are not critical path, we think it would be to a modest, significant disadvantage if these were left unresolved until after substantial completion. As Ms. Impastato has described the safety certification process, there are numerous elements related to design certification as well as construction and testing. And depending on the resolution of the issue, it could have implications for safety and security certification, as well as system performance demonstration testing, and ultimately operational readiness. So we are bringing them to the board's attention now in hopes to really urge MWA to increase their attention on these issues and bring them to resolution.
Thank you. Hopefully we will do that today. The final question I have is the summary slide, slide 13, which is entitled Summary of Unresolved Open Issues, where from both groups, both the old 14 and the new 14 group, you identified 10 that are still unresolved. And so my question is, of those 10, which are the ones or the one that give you the most concern?
I think the ones that give me the most concern in this, and I will go back to them, is the station platform paver installation. This is an issue that was actually first found following the completion of phase 1 and relates to the design of the pavers themselves, which have led to increased maintenance costs. We found this issue and brought it to MWA's attention in late 2017 and are looking for a solution to be installed in phase 2 so that we do not have the same issues that we found on phase 1. What we have here is really going to increase our maintenance costs, and so we would like a comprehensive program to address these issues. I think the second issue that gives me most concern would be the damage to the direct fixation track fasteners. This was listed under component failures. This is a relatively recent issue coming up this summer in May of 2020. We observed that the contractor has been needing to replace many direct fixation track fasteners, which is very surprising at this point in the project, as these components typically have a lifespan of 20, 30 years. So if you see many hundreds of them, potentially thousands of them being replaced, gives us significant concern as to the root cause of that damage. I will say that we have been discussing this with MWA and its contractor, and all three parties recognize the potential severity of this issue and are investigating this proactively. The third issue I put in the top category of most important or most risky is the Crossbond issue. We have put that as underway because we've had very productive discussions with our ATC engineers and the contractors. But until we have those designs approved, I will maintain that in the unresolved category.
Just for the sake of clarity for fellow board members as well as the public at large, could you just describe what is a track fastener and what is a platform paver?
Sure, a track fastener, I wish I had a picture of these. Should have thought about that. These are the components that hold the rail at the precise location, elevation, and angle for our direct fixation track. So where we are either in tunnels or on aerial structures, we have direct fixation track fasteners in lieu of ties. So these are small, relatively small components, but they are critical to holding the rail in place at the appropriate height and angle. And the paver, what we're referring to is the platform itself, what passengers stand on, and the joints between those, what would look to you to be tiles, the stones themselves, and how we prevent water from penetrating into the platform itself.
So it's just the tiles that people actually will stand on the platform.
Correct, and it's not a structural issue. This is very different from the issues we have seen in the platform rehabilitation program. This is getting into the setting bed and the deposits that we will see if you walked underneath the platform edge. Again, this will become a maintenance issue, but at this time, we're not concerned about the structural integrity.
Thank you. I'm sure my colleagues have some questions for you as well. Mr. Rouse?
Yes, certainly. Thank you. And starting with the Crossbond issue, I'm watching this carefully because, and you just put up the picture here. If you want a track fastener, there's the little black rubber things under the rail there.
Yes, thank you. I should have thought of this picture.
Yeah, and thank you. We have a little factoid here. We have left-handed fasteners and E-clips. Thank you, Art, if you're out there listening. But that's unique. Many have right-handed. But I digress. On the Crossbond issue, I think one thing that I'm watching very closely is how we resolve this, because again, in surface, I'm not overly concerned, right? We have a little bit of play here. But certainly the Crossbond, because it's an electrified railroad, those tie in with the spacing to the impedance bond, as you mentioned, and that really sets our track circuit. And track circuits and blocks are designed based on things like stopping distance, right? So they relate to safety and the safe operation of the system. So while there's a little bit of play to hopefully get back to where we need to be, certainly if it continues to expand beyond what we can reasonably absorb out of the capacity of the design right now, then that can start to snowball and lead to a much longer and lengthy design process. So far that doesn't seem to be the case, and as long as our ATC engineers and the supplier and others are competent and we test thoroughly to make sure it's working appropriately and as expected, let's cross our fingers we're on the right path here, but certainly if it starts to digress from here, I think that's something we'd obviously want to know about sooner rather than later, because that's going to definitely have potential impacts on the schedule if you have to start doing major track circuit redesigns and software redesigns from there. So as it relates to the quality issues, I think as with many, it's discouraging when you see QA/QC issues, especially on projects like this. We're using public money. I mean, you want to get a quality product. I think I said that when we first talked about the turnouts, why they leave a manufacturer without having core measurements to make sure they were manufactured correctly in the first place, so you can narrow down, is it an installation issue? Is it a manufacturer issue that's causing some problem? I don't know. I'll be honest, I've been seeing this quality issues a lot more often throughout the industry, especially on rolling stock and similar issues. I don't know why that is. We have specs for these things for a reason. And over the past 100 years, we've developed some pretty good standards for production. It's certainly not unusual to have manufacturers come and go bankrupt or change source material changes. But that's why we've developed mill standards and other procedures to take production lots and take samples and make sure as we're going and producing these devices that they're within spec before we install them. So I don't know if it's a manufacturer issue or if it's the installation issue, but I'm sure your team's running that to ground. And I think everybody involved in this process, us, MWA, and even the contractor, are not happy when these things come up. It's not something anybody wants to have to deal with. But one question I have on my mind is, given unique relationship or unique contractual relationship in this case, what does the QA/QC oversight process look like for WMATA in this particular instance with Silverline?
So in this particular instance, the responsibility for that actually lies with the airport's authority. So within their relationship with their contractors, they have fairly typical QC processes. The contractor can identify any non-conformances, submit non-conformance reports or deficiency reports to the engineer of record to get resolution and incorporate as the airport authority. They also have a process where they can generate IRRs, issues requiring resolution, or corrective action requests if they are not satisfied with the remediation plan for a deficiency, or if they see an issue they think is systemic in nature. Given our relationship is with the airport's authority, what we have created is a process internally where we have a oversight issues list. OIL is the acronym we are using, where we identify issues we would like MWA to investigate. Generally speaking, those OIL items would likely become an IRR or something the airport's authority requires the contractor to address, though often once we have brought it up, the contractor themselves can initiate the appropriate reports from their end, a deficiency report to document and track to resolution. We do have a number of items on this list, and as we approach punch list, what we are trying to distinguish, particularly for you as a board, is those issues that we think rise above a punch list item that we are confident will get fixed through normal processes, and ones that appear to have stalled or could have significant impacts or affect our ability to recommend that we accept this project. So that is what we are following here, is a process where MWA is really in control of the quality control, but we are observing and raising issues through the oversight items list.
Yeah, and so thank you for that. The oil list that you just mentioned, is that really all coming from us and our observations or audits or anything else of that nature? Or is that, where does that list really come from?
It comes primarily from our side in terms of our observations. We do have people in the field who are observing the installation and testing, as well as where we have seen issues that have not been resolved, we will raise them and try and push to get resolution on an issue, even if it may already be documented in an IRR or a deficiency report.
And, the next questions, maybe somewhat of a trick question, so you don't have to answer it necessarily, but is there anything you see from a lessons learned perspective here on this procurement, given the size and scope, that we should be taking back in terms of future procurements or contracts we might issue? If again, if there's nothing here, that's fine, or you don't want to mention, that's okay too. I just always think that these are, we can't change what's happened at this point, but we can always learn from it and make sure that when we have more control over direct contract or whatever it may be, that we can institute some changes if we see there's something we might benefit from here.
I think we have taken some lessons from this project. I will say kind of the top level takeaway for me is that if we're going to do a design build, how important it is to have a relationship between the design builder and the ultimate owner and maintainer. We have a couple of projects that have proceeded in a fashion similar to the Silver Line, where it is a design build contract that held by local jurisdiction or another entity. And while Silver Line is the largest and has therefore also had proportionally the biggest challenges, in all cases, the lack of a direct relationship between us and a design builder working on our property, I think, creates complications in the design review and in the resolution of quality issues. That is something we will seek to avoid in the future.
Okay. Thank you very much, both of you, for this. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Rouse. Ms. Gideby?
Are there any other, going to slide 8, are there any other open issues that has not been brought to the board's attention that we should be aware of as potential pieces that may come that would delay the project?
At this time, no. I'm bringing forward those items I think warrant your attention. There are and will continue to be other issues that come up, and we will try first to resolve them at the project level. We've also implemented bi-weekly executive coordination meetings for technical review between myself, my counterpart at the Airports Authority, and executives from the contractor teams. So we are working through escalating issues that are not resolved at the project level, first to that executive level. And if we are not able to get to resolution, we will bring them to the board. You have my commitment that I will continue to bring issues to you if I think they are not able or likely to be resolved in a timely fashion, and not have any surprises for you when we get to a point of being ready to recommend the project be accepted.
One of the things that I was hoping for clarification on, is this considered a new or an existing line of service by adding Silver Line Phase 2?
It is an extension, but I'm not sure I understand the intent of your question.
When there's a new service, it requires a different type of analysis, particularly around Title VI. And I thought that this was considered an existing, or yes, an extension piece. Is that, you're telling me that is the case, or is this considered a new line of service?
I would have to get back to you on that in terms of when or how the Title VI analysis was conducted.
One was conducted already?
I would have to get back to you. I'm sure one has been done at earlier levels in project development, but I don't have that information at hand.
Okay, thank you.
Does that complete your line of questions, Ms. Gideby?
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Letourneau, the man from Loudon.
Yeah, we just actually did a briefing for the Loudon Board's Finance Committee on all things Silver Line Phase 2, which a lot of it was focused on our financial commitments, but it was a good reminder for me how significant the region's commitments to this project have been. And honestly, I mean, I'm very frustrated that, every time we have one of these briefings, we hear about some new things potentially, and we hear about a further delay in the ability to operate this project. And I'm not assigning blame to that. I'm just saying, that's what we hear. And I understand the reality of these huge mega projects. The initial probably 12 to 18 months of this was spent in delays because of stormwater management redesign and the decision of everybody jointly to sort of go back and redesign the project to meet new stormwater guidelines, which were not initially in place. But now we're into the point where we're just about done with the project and we have some new issues that keep popping up. Some of them are not new issues. So I do want to just really make sure I understand the issues that are coming forward today that are being characterized as sort of new issues for the board. Most of them are not new issues, only one or two, I think, like the turntable deficiencies. But these are issues that have been identified to MWA Has MWA taken action with their contractor on them and we are just simply not satisfied with that? Or has there been no response? Or where exactly do these sit in terms of what MWA's reaction has been on these unresolved open issues?
So the dates I have shown on the slides against each item are the date that we, WMATA, either brought it to MWA, to the Airports Authority, or the Airports Authority shared it with us in the cases where they identified the issue first, but it's when we were both mutually tracking these issues. Each of them are in a different location. Unfortunately, I cannot give you a broad characterization that would cover all 14 items. All of them have been discussed and are now being looked at those bi-weekly executive meetings to make sure we are pushing to resolution. In some cases, it may have gotten pushed to the back burner and we are trying to get through documentation because we've agreed largely on the path forward. That would be the case for that last category I presented where we have a resolution, but we are still awaiting either documentation to complete it and close out the item, or where we have addressed, for example, with the line of sight, I believe we've addressed 7 out of 8 locations. So each of them is a unique issue and would have a unique status. There's not a blanket answer I can give you in terms of we are waiting for M1 on all of these. The fact that they are on this list as unresolved reflects, though, that we do not have agreement between us, the Airports Authority, and its contractor in terms of the path forward and resolution.
Okay. I'm all about trying to find solutions to these things as fast as possible, and that could potentially include greater involvement from myself, from Mr. Smedberg, from others. So I want to have some offline discussions with staff about how we may be able to advance some of these things with the Airports Authority and with their board, and ensure that we are on the same page. Because ultimately, we want to be moving this as quickly as we can be. But I also agree that from the WMATA standpoint, we cannot accept things that are outstanding like this and put us in a poor position moving forward. So I'll have some offline discussions about how to maybe address some of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Letourneau. Secretary Slater, questions?
Great, thank you. Just one question. I want to be clear about something when I look at all the issues associated with kind of the project end date and when the system will be really starting to move forward, the Crossbond issue seems to be the one that probably, at least through the materials that I've seen, seems to be the one that is the most risk in terms of the project end date. Is that correct?
That is likely correct. In the sense that it's a high risk item, it requires design to be approved at each of these locations, as well as implementation and testing. My only caveat to that is where we don't have a root cause on component failures that could result in us learning something that would raise that above the Crossbond issue. But at this time, that is a correct statement.
Great, thank you. That was the only question I had.
Thank you. Mr. McMillan?
Thanks. So Laura, I know for some of these issues, there's a range of acceptability. So like when we were talking about cross-level, you want it delivered to a very tight tolerance, but you would operate at a somewhat looser tolerance and still have an acceptable safety margin. But if you were briefing us on an existing line, let's say the red line, and reporting that we discovered 1,500 cracked insulators and thousands of fasteners that had been replaced. Without getting too far into hypotheticals here, that sounds like a situation where we probably wouldn't be running the red line until we got to the bottom of it. Is it potentially that level of seriousness, the types of things you're finding here?
Not exactly. I think what What it reflects is concern about the durability of the project.
Yeah.
In all cases, these components have generally a healthy margin of failure in terms of that acceptability. When do you suspend service? Before you suspend, you slow down service. So just taking the example of track fasteners, a single fastener being damaged does not warrant slowing down service, but a stretch where every track fastener is damaged would require slowing down service. And if we see the rail is moving under load, we would potentially stop service. But what this reflects to us is either an installation issue, in which case we have concerns about how it was installed and how to ensure it won't be repeated, or potentially some other underlying issue. So it could be installation, it could be in component manufacturing, in which case we would have concerns about the spares, or it could be some other underlying cause that is introducing more stress into the system, which is what would be most concerned about, because if we replace these and then they continue to crack and fail at this rate, it would be very difficult to maintain them in a safe condition for operations.
Okay. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
We
this
are
is
still
Paul Whit-
conducting dynamic testing. That's why these are not on the critical path. They are not yet at a point where we have to suspend testing.
Mr. Chairman, this is Paul Wiedefeld, if I may, just one comment.
Yes, sir, please.
Just so we're clear, Steve, even under the hypothetical that you put out there, that would not be Laura's call. That would be the safety officer's call. With all these types of, issues, eventually, if we're shutting down anything, it's because the safety office has deemed it, to be such. So just a reminder that the operations people do not make that final call.
Okay. Important clarification, and I was maybe trying too hard there to get an answer to a very simple question, which is, this isn't a matter of close enough. If insulators are cracked and likely to be cracking for reasons we haven't determined, that would be a serious operational concern anywhere in the system. And this isn't the kind of thing that we can just sort of muddle through and figure out later. We got to figure this out before we're running passengers over it, correct?
Correct. These
Okay.
would not allow us to get into operational readiness testing. We need to have resolution.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I won't go further than that.
Thank you. Mr. Meridian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions at this time.
Mr. Smedberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have actually a question for Teresa. Teresa, I'm curious, on slide 16 and 17, you talked about the WMSC and the safety oversight responsibilities that they have. What is their level of activity right now? I would suspect it's not knowing how this all sort of works on a detailed day-to-day level, but how I suspect that they should be fairly engaged at this point. Is that the case?
Yes, sir. The WMSC attends all of the committee meetings, and they regularly communicate with both MWA and WMATA. They conduct independent inspections and verification activities as well. They've performed fire life safety inspections and have submitted those reports to MWA for action. And WMATA has received those reports as well as information. So we are in constant regular communication.
Okay, and they're active. And what is their ultimate engagement in terms of certification?
So the WMSC reviews the process for certification and assures independently that each entity, both the Airports Authority and Metro, follow their process robustly and accordingly. They look at the outcome of the process to ensure that it's reflective of performing the appropriate due diligence. The WMSC will not necessarily issue an approval of initiating service, but they will assure that we've followed our process in order to certify the system at the appropriate phases of the project as safe and reliable for public use.
And when do they are they engaged in that process already? That second part there, or does that come later on once
So-
Laura is able to work through all her issues?
So at the point of substantial completion, where the Airports Authority will essentially hand off the lead in the safety certification process to Metro, the WMSC would be engaged and involved in evaluating the compliance with process and looking at the output to assure that there's no concerns or issues from the Airports Authority. They are actively working on that with MWA and Metro now. They will also, as we move into the operational readiness phases of the project, be actively engaged and involved with the Metro team as we review our final readiness and preparedness and simulated service and testing requirements. So they have already reached out to us, and we've been working to show them the basis for decision making, as well as some of our analyses and evaluations for service planning in the phases of operational readiness.
Do they have any regulatory authority over MWA? They really don't, do they? Just.
I think the authority question is probably best answered by a legal counsel, but from a practicality standpoint, they are the State Safety Oversight Agency, and FTA would look to them to oversee MWA as part of the funding agreement.
Okay, I'm sort of asking this because I'm sort of interested in knowing. Well, glad to hear they are engaged at this point. I would think they would want to be in that position as well. I would hate to see it come in at the end and then potentially prolong this process by several months potentially after the two of you have finished all your important work. So thank you. I'm just trying to get a sense of, where potentially that was heading with them. So thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Well, ladies, thank you for your presentations today. I suspect we will have you back early in the new year in February, March for another update presentation, and perhaps we will learn at that point whether MWA is going to make their April 1 target date for so-called substantial completion, or whether that date will get pushed back for some additional weeks or months at that point. And of course, I would just note for everybody's benefit that that's not the date when we would actually begin service, but that's a date when another 150 days of, as you call it, operational readiness testing and pre-revenue activities are undertaken before that potential start of service no sooner than sometime in the fall of next year, 2021. So thank you again very much, and look forward to seeing you in the new year. Have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and come back with some better news in the new year about Silver Line Phase 2. Thank you.
We will try our best.
All right, thank you very much. With no further business to come before the Safety and Operations Committee today, we stand adjourned.